So here we have our whole salmon side, and what you're looking for when you're purchasing salmon is even coloration, no strong odors, no stickiness, no sliminess. You're looking for a nice, cold, good, even color on your fillet. So the first thing you want to do before you skin or cut or do anything to your salmon fillet is check for bones. 90 to 95% of what you're going to find in the store these days is already deboned, but sometimes they miss them. So right here, there is kind of a divot in the flesh, and that's where the bones used to be. So all you have to do is take your fingers, check the edge, and then run your fingers down there, and you'll feel a little bite almost. Not a painful one, but a little bite that grabs your finger if there are any bones remaining. I don't see any. I do feel one down here. You always want to check the end towards the head, where the head would be, and that's sometimes where they miss those bones. So what you do is you take a tweezers, you go in, find that bone. You shouldn't have to dig too much into the flesh, but you go, you grab it. So at this point, we're good to go ahead and skin the fillet. So I have a few knives here today. I have the classic chef knife. I like a 10-inch blade, which is a little long for some, but it's just a preference that I have. We're gonna use this to get the skinning process started. And then after that, when we do work with removing the bloodline, I have a fillet knife here, which is flexible and makes it very easy to take off that flesh. So now we're going to take that skin off. The trick that I have that makes it very easy and yields the most meat from the skin is a process where we're going to start it here, and I'm actually going to use my hand and slide it down the length of the fillet, and the skin will peel right off. Going toward the fat end of the fillet, getting as close to the skin as we can. We're going to take the edge of our hand, stick it in that crease, and start moving your hand down the fillet. You're going to want to hold on to the tail section as firm as you can and keep that taut. Continue to move your hand, pushing down and away from you and through the meat. And then your skin comes right off. So with this skin, you can save this and turn it into crispy salmon skin. Some people like that as a snack. Some people like giving it to their dogs. For our purposes, we don't need it, so we are going to discard it. All right, so I'm gonna start still with my chef knife, and I'm gonna take off this belly. I'm gonna save these for a sandwich or salmon cakes, something like that. It's very fatty and flavorful, but I don't want it as part of my salmon fillet. So now that the skin is off and the belly is taken off, we're gonna flip this over and start to take off the bloodline. For me, the bloodline is what gives salmon that really off-putting, fishy flavor, so I take as much of this off as I can. So for this process, I'm gonna grab the fillet knife and just very gently start taking some of this off, working your way down the salmon, trying not to go too deep into the flesh. So when you cut that off, you'll see I didn't get too deep here, but it exposes that bright orange color of the salmon, and that's what you want. And this is garbage. This is not going to taste good. So right down the middle of the back of the fillet, there's bloodline. To get that out without going too deep into the fish, we're going to use a V cut to take it out piece by piece. You're going to angle in towards the fish a little bit, go in only about 1/4 of an inch, and then you're going to point your knife away and go in the same and bring that out. What we're going to do is first cut this down into even center cuts. The reason you want a center cut is because this end over here is inconsistent in size, and this end over here is too thin to cure. We're going to take the fillet, take our chef knife, and only cut about 3 or 4 inches off of the end of the fillet there. We're going to turn it around, and we're going to look consistent thickness, and that's where we're going to cut. On this fillet, it's about 7 or 8 inches down. Now these pieces are obviously great for meal prep, anything you want to do with those tonight's dinner maybe. So we're going to set those aside and use them in a different manner. we have our saran wrap lined baking pan, and the saran wrap is going to fully encase the salmon as it cures. Here we have kosher salt, sugar, some bourbon, and our PS seasoning on the Rocs. All right, for the salt, we use kosher salt. You don't want an iodized salt. Iodized salt is too fine and surprisingly gives more of a salty flavor that you don't want. This is going to be a little milder, and what it's going to do is it's going to pull the moisture out of the fish as well as add flavor. Here we have sugar along the same lines. Bourbon, that's going to add a little bit of moisture that'll soak into the flesh, which will give it some good flavor. And today we chose our On the Rocs bourbon pepper seasoning. This has salt, peppercorns, blood orange, and bourbon flavors that's going to really complement our cure. First things first, we're going to put our cure at the bottom of the pan so it gets underneath the fillet. We're going to start with salt, and you're going to cover just enough so that it'll fully encase the fish. Then our sugar. Sugar to salt ratio should be about 4 to 1. We're going to wait on the bourbon to go on top of the fish, but we are going to put our On the Rocs seasoning underneath. And for this one, we're not going to use the grinder. We're just going to open up and pour it all over. All right, let's place our salmon right on top. And then we're going to repeat the process with the cure ingredients on top of the salmon. First the salt. And again, you want enough to cover the salmon. Sugar, 4 to 1 sugar to salt ratio. We're going to pour about 2 ounces of bourbon. Put a little more salt since that came off a bit. And then again with our On the Rocs seasoning. And this is going to look really nice with the large grain salt and the whole peppercorns. And now we're going to wrap the fish in the saran wrap. So you're just going to take the sides up and encase the whole thing in the plastic. All right, so at this point, all of those seasonings are pushed against the fish. The bourbon is trapped in there. So we're going to wrap it one more time to make sure it's liquid tight, and we're going to put it in the fridge. We are all wrapped up, and now we're going to put our press on top. I found 2 baking dishes that fit inside of each other. This should be a good weight. You don't want to completely squish it, but you do want some pressure on top. This will help really adhere the cure to the fish as well as draw out some of that moisture. This is going to go into the fridge for 24 to 36 hours, so we're looking at 2 or 3 days, and we're going to have to rotate, flip upside down the fish every 12 to 24 hours, at least twice. During the curing process, you're going to want to flip the salmon every 12 to 24 hours, just to make sure that the cure sets evenly. When you're done, replace the weight and put it back in the fridge. It's been about 48 hours since we started our cure with a few flips in between. Now we're ready to unwrap and rinse the fish. Make sure you rinse off all the remaining cure to make sure there is no salt or granules left on the salmon. Then we're going to pat it dry with a paper towel. All right, our salmon's looking pretty good. You'll see that the salmon now has some more rigidity to it, and it stands up a little better than the raw fillet. Now, we're going to slice very thin and plate it up. The best way to cut our salmon is going to be on a bias and very thin. We're going to cut away from our hand so that we don't cut ourselves, and that way we have a little more control over how big our pieces are. don't use it all right away, you can store it in an airtight container in your fridge for 2 to 3 days. Thanks for watching. I'm Chef Jed here at the PS Seasoning Culinary Center.